Welcome to the Dread Expanse, where the crazy concepts, theories, and speculation about World of Warcraft come to thrive. Here, the Quack be king. Who be the Quack? I be the Quack. Why be Quack? Because I am the Quack. Today we're going to be talking about Sporemound theory, going from what it is to the proof that supports it and the damning implications it has for the heroes of Azeroth and what they may face in the future. What is Sporemound theory? Question mark? Sporemound theory is basically the theory that the old gods are void corrupted plants, or more specifically, corrupted plant creatures that most likely lived in water and were fused with their ecosystem. I know, it's more quack than the usual theory, but if you hold out to the end of this part, and the series as a whole, I swear you'll never unsee this theory again. Part 2. Sporemounds. In Part 1 it was hopefully made clear the Void Lords do exist, and it was made clear they in turn created the Old Gods by infecting or possibly corrupting denizens of the cosmos with void energies. The real question that follows through, though, is, well, who, or, more precisely, what did the Void Lords corrupt? That is what we're going to answer today. And as the theory states, and as this part states as well, we're going to be going into the Sporemounds. What are the Sporemounds? The short version is they are extremely hungry and quacking dangerous plants that were native to ancient Dreanor. They eventually took the shape of mountain-crushing plant giants to defeat a mountain-crushing elemental giant called Grond, who was created by Agrimar. The Sporemounds won, technically, then they lost, technically. Then the fourth Sporemound was created an untold amount of time later, and it got burnt to ash by the Arakoa. There's a lot of interesting stuff in Chronicle Volume 2 between pages 12 and 33. When it comes to the Sporemounds, though, these extracts give you a good, straight-to-the-point explanation. Extract. Chronicle Volume 2, Dreanor and the Evergrowth, pages 12 to 13. Draenor's greatest predators did not hunt with fang or claw. They hunted with root and thorn. A carnivorous strain of plant had sprouted on Dreanor. These lifeforms were known as Sporemounds. Their tendril-like vines slithered over the earth and strangled every primitive beast they could reach. As they grew, the Sporemounds consumed more and more and more. The hunger and need to expand knew no end. They blossomed into living mountains of tangled brambles and noxious pods. Wherever the Sporemounds' tendrils crept over the earth, lush forests and swampy mires took root. Before long, a labyrinth of deep wilds stretched to the far corners of the world. Not even Draenor's elemental energies were safe from the Sporemounds. Their roots wormed deep underground in search of water. As they did, the invading plant life tapped into the fifth element that suffused Draenor's stones and soil. Consuming this primordial energy ignited a crude communal sentience within the Sporemounds and the surrounding wilds. This newfound intelligence allowed Draenor's plants to act as a single, massive organism. The Sporemounds and all other vegetation became collectively known as the Evergrowth. If any major threat arose, the Evergrowth could react in unison, yet such threats were non-existent. The Evergrowth dominated everything in sight, and nothing could hold it at bay. Extract. Chronicle Volume 2, The Taming of Dreanor, pages 13 to 14. The other Sporemounds shivered in agony at the destruction of their kin. Mere roots and vines would not topple Grond. The Sporemounds needed a weapon. They needed to adapt. Each Sporemound drained the surrounding forests and jungles of life essence, leaving behind only withered tracts of land. Infused with these energies, the Sporemounds arose to walk the world. There were 3 Sporemounds in total. Each embodied a different region of the Evergrowth's domain. The first was called Zang. Swampy mires and mushroom thickets glistened across its hide. The second, Botanni, was covered with primal forest lands. The last of the Sporemounds was known as Nanu, and it wore a fleece of dense jungle. As one, the Sporemounds moved against Grond, and Dreanor buckled under the weight of the warring giants. There's also one more extract I'm going to include. Now, this extract is not 100% relevant to this theory, however the concept that surrounds it deserves its own explanation. Its presence in regards to the Sporemounds is something that cannot be ignored. Extract. Chronicle Volume 2, Dreanor and the Evergrowth, page 12. An abundance of the fifth element, the spirit of life, had saturated the world. This force had a natural calming effect on the elemental spirits. It tempered their violent nature, and it even prevented them from taking on physical forms. The fifth element had another, far more extraordinary effect on Dreanor. It accelerated the growth of flora and fauna. It made the world into a cradle of vibrant, untamed life. If the relations to the old gods hasn't clicked yet, don't worry. The following comparisons should do it. The following extracts that relate to the old gods and the void lords are from Chronicle Volume 1. They'll be categorized as Volume 1 for these comparisons. Those that relate to the Sporemounds are from Chronicle Volume 2. They will be categorized as Volume 2 for these comparisons. Oh, and I do warn, by the way, there are a lot more extracts in this part than Part 1. Comparison 1. Volume 1. Driven by an insatiable hunger, the Void Lords seek to devour all matter and energy in the physical universe. Volume 2. As they grew, the Sporemounds consumed more and more and more. Their hunger and need to expand knew no end. Volume 2. If left unchecked, the plant life would consume everything on the world, even the elemental spirits. Once that had happened, the Evergrowth would devour itself. Dreanor would be left a dust-blown wasteland, devoid of even the most primitive life. Comparison 2. Volume 1. The old god's tendrils had burrowed deep, enveloping the slumbering Titan spirit in shadow. Volume 1. Like gargantuan cancerous pustules, the old gods spread their corruptive influence across the landscape. The lands around them seethed and withered, turning black and lifeless for leagues upon leagues. All the while, the tendrils of the old gods wormed into the crust, slithering deeper and deeper towards the defenseless heart of Azeroth. Volume 2. Their roots wormed deep underground in search of water. As they did, invading plant life tapped into the fifth element that suffused Draenor's stones and soil. Volume 2. Their tendril-like vines slithered over the earth and strangled every primitive beast they could reach. Volume 2. Wherever the Sporemounds' tendrils crept over the earth, lush forests and swampy mires took root. Before long, a labyrinth of deep wilds stretched to the far corners of the world. Comparison 3. Volume 1. These old gods towered over the land, mountains of flesh pockmarked with hundreds of gnashing maws and black unfeeling eyes. A miasma of despair soon enveloped everything that lay in their writhing shadow. Volume 2. They blossomed into living mountains of tangled brambles and noxious pods. So, I'll be honest. When I was putting this together, I honestly got the feeling someone at Blizzard had decided to drop the mic. The joke is, I'm pretty sure this is the weakest stuff when it comes to the connections between the old gods and the Sporemounds. But, as those who are experienced in speculation know, similarities don't equal proof or connections. This could just be a high tier of lazy writing. I hope not, but I'll leave that judgment to you watching. On to the next overarching similarity, the creation of the Gnarlgar, otherwise known as the Faceless, and the Aqir, versus the creation of the Genesaur, Botanni, and Podlings. This connection has a lot to do with how both sets of creatures were created, and has a lot of potential to explain what the fifth element, spirit, is/does. However, building a theory upon a theory is basically building a house of cards. You're asking for something to go wrong. So, to keep this section specifically related to the Sporemounds and the Old Gods, the how in relation to this section will be relatively surface deep. Okay, so the Gnarlgar and the Aqir are described as being created like this. Extract. Chronicle Volume 1. Coming of the Old Gods. Page 29. Organic matter seeped from the old gods' blighted forms, giving rise to two distinct races. The first were the cunning and intelligent Gnarlgar, also known as the Faceless ones. The second were the Aqir, insectoids of incredible resilience and strength. As the physical manifestations of the old gods will, both of these races would serve their masters with fanatical loyalty. On the other hand, the Botanni, Genesaur, and Podlings are described as being created like this. Extract. Chronicle Volume 2. The Blood of Giants. Page 16. During the battle between Grond and the Sporemounds, pieces of the Leviathans had fallen to the earth and given rise to new types of life. The seeds and roots that had tumbled from Zane, Nanu, and Batan contained a small portion of their life essence. Many unique beings sprouted from their plant matter. The strongest were the lumbering giants called the Genesaur. A mane of thick fronds covered the skin of these four-legged beings. Despite their enormous size, they were incredibly swift and agile. Extract. Chronicle Volume 2. The Breakers and the Primals. Page 20. Like the Breakers, many of the Primals arose in the aftermath of Batan's destruction. The numerous spores released from the giant's corpse settled in the wilds. While these spores weakened the creatures of stone, they had the opposite effect on plant life. The spores gave sentience to existing forms of plants. The jungle stirred as new beings took shape and walked the land. Some were small and simple-minded creatures, called podlings and sporelings. The most intelligent and prolific new race was called the Botanni. Oh right, one more thing. I forgot to mention the Sporemounds that created the Podlings and the Botanni quite literally came from Batan. Extract. Chronicle Volume 2. The Breakers and the Primals. Page 19. When Batan had exploded, its body had released countless spores teeming with the spirit of life. These spores drifted back to the world's surface and warped whatever they touched. I'm hoping what happened to a certain old god is coming to mind right now. You know, Yasharaj. I'm honestly trying to reduce the amount of extracts I use right now, so I hope you know who and what happened to Yasharaj. Otherwise you may be a bit lost from here on. But back to the main point. The similarities between these two sets of creatures is that both were quite literally created from the parts of their forebearers. The Gnarlgar and the Aqir from the organic matter of the old gods, while the Genesaur were created from the plant matter of the Sporemounds. I highly suggest looking into the difference between plant matter and organic matter. There isn't much of a difference. Now, as for the Botanni and the Podlings, their creation stems from an event that is suspiciously similar to another event that happened on Azeroth, the aforementioned death of Y'Shaarj. The base assumption here is that could the death of Y'Shaarj give rise to different, albeit oddly similar creatures that arose on Dreanor on Azeroth? To address the obvious elephant in the room, by the way, yes, the Sporemounds are creatures of life, so of course they have the potential to create life. And yes, the old gods obviously scream the end of everything. So, how would they create life if Chronicle is correct? Well, the technical specifics on how is for another day. However, as was hopefully explained in part 1, void energies can act like an infection. So, what's saying the void didn't corrupt beings of nature? I mean, from the Nexus in Wrath of the Lich King to Legion and the Cathedral of Eternal Night. How many variations of flora and fauna have we actually seen? I'm under the impression there's been a few. Though, if this isn't enough to get you thinking, have you ever wondered why the Aqir were insectoids? You know, apparently bug-like, but also something else. I don't know if you've been to a forest or a jungle or a swamp, but I have been to one at the very least, and I can guarantee you there are a lot of bugs around. Also, as for the Faceless, just to add another quack to the flock, 2 words: amorphic cognitor. Amorphic, primary definition, having no defined shape, lacking form, amorphous. Or, simplifying the technical terms, shapeless. Cognitor, primary definition. In Roman law, an advocate or defender in a private cause, one who defends the cause of a person who was present. Simplified once again, protector. Amorphic cognitor, simplified. Shapeless defender. Location: Vale of Anzu, Spires of Arak, alternate Dreanor. I do wonder though, what does it really mean to be faceless? Oh well, onto the Curse of Flesh. Devised by Yogg-Saron, the plan was simple. Extract, Chronicle Volume 1, Loken's Betrayal, page 54. It would corrupt the Forge of Wills, tainting its creation matrix with a strange malady known as the Curse of Flesh. Any Titan Forge created by the machine thereafter would fall victim to this affliction. Some would even spread it to previous generations of Titan Forged. The curse would gradually transform many of these infected servants into mortal beings of flesh and blood. Beings who the cunning old gods knew could be easily killed. Coming to the present, we know the Curse of Flesh works. The known races affected by this curse are the Tol'vir, Mo'u, Vrykul giants, including Ettins, humans, gnomes, and dwarves. All of these races are creatures of flesh to a varied degree. Now, after scouring through a few mountains worth of lore, I have only been able to find one other instance where something similar to the Curse of Flesh has occurred. Specifically, the explanation behind the lineage of the orcs. Though, to be honest, it's not really similar. It's almost identical. The main difference being that the creation of flesh is basically explained in less than one subtitle. Before I read the next extract, there's one thing you need to know. Angramar created Grond, Grond created the Colossals, and the Colossals created the Magron. How they were created is once again related to another theory. The important information to know, though, is these races were all considered to be made of stone. They, for all intents and purposes, had no relation to flesh. Extract. Chronicle Volume 2, The Breakers and the Primals, page 21. For many ages after the end of the Evergrowth, the descendants of the Colossals and the Sporemounds vied for dominance over the world. Magron and Genesaur were not the sole inheritors of the conflict. New creatures of stone and root emerged, joining the war. When Botanni had exploded, it had released countless spores, teeming with the spirit of life. These spores drifted back to the world's surface and walked whatever they touched. They clung to the hides of Magaron and weakened their bodies. Some of the Magaron developed into half-flesh, half-stone giants called Gron. These massive predators stalked the edges of the wilds, terrorizing lesser life forms and devouring anything they could find. The Gron were only moderately intelligent, but they proved to be exceptional hunters. The jagged spikes that protruded from their skin served as weapons to kill their prey, and rocky plates functioned as armor to protect them from other dangers. Due to the lingering effects of the spores, a small number of Gron continued to degenerate into the one-eyed Ogron. They were more intelligent than the Gron, but they were not as strong. The Ogron feared the Gron, and they viewed the hulking beasts as gods. Just as Gron had evolved, so too would a number of Ogron. Over thousands of years, the residual spores will transform them into fleshy creatures called ogres. These brutes were smaller than their progenitors, and many of them would become the slaves to the Ogron. From the ogres would rise yet another race, a people called the Orcs. They were the smallest of Gron's line, yet what they lacked in size, they made up for with a fierce sense of intellect and a sense of community. By banding together, they survived the harsh wilds. So that's how flesh was created on Dreanor. It was a gradual process that lasted a few thousand years. It definitely turned stone to flesh, and only afflicted stone creatures, and was caused by a Sporemound. Specifically, the spores of that Sporemound. Spores, by the way, are basically a plant's way of reproducing. They are usually very small. The intriguing part about all this, though, is the specific cause of flesh, the spirit of life. Unfortunately, I once again have to say the specifics on how this could work is a theory for another day. However, if this theory about Sporemounds and the old gods is correct, is it that hard to believe a plant, a Sporemound-like being, corrupted by the void, Yogg-Saron in this case, somehow spread its tiny spores into the seemingly massive Forge of Wills, making the flat reason why finding the cause of the Curse of Flesh and curing the Curse of Flesh so difficult, for the simple reason the mortals of Azeroth are quite literally the children of the Titans and the old gods, and to remove the curse, some form of death has to occur. Food for thought. The overarching connection is that both Sporemounds and old gods seem to have the ability to create flesh beings from Titan creations. The next connection we're going to be going to is looking at the creation of Talaa. What is Talaa? Talaa is the fourth Sporemound I mentioned at the start. It was created an unknown amount of time after the original Sporemounds. The first interesting point about Talaa is how the Sporemound was created. Extract. Chronicle Volume 2. Heralds of the Evergrowth. Page 26. In time, the Treant came across a massive fossilized root, one of the few intact pieces of Botanni that still remained in the world. Extract. Chronicle Volume 2. Heralds of the Evergrowth. Page 26. Gnarlgar planted the root deep within Talador and began a great ritual to nourish it. Thousands of Botanni willingly sacrificed themselves, and the Treant infused their spirits into the root. Slowly, leaves and branches sprouted from the earth. These, in turn, grew into a mound of thorny brambles and leathery fronds. Gnarlgar named the burgeoning Sporemound Talaa. Extract. Chronicle Volume 2. Heralds of the Evergrowth, page 28. Meanwhile, Gnarlgar quickened Talaa's maturation. The Treant knew the time had come to attack the Arakoa before they could regroup and strengthen their defenses. Gnarlgar ordered more Botanni to sacrifice themselves, and it shunted their spirits into the Sporemound's veins. Finally, Talaa stirred. Giant fronds unfurled from around it, and the Sporemound rose up to its full height, towering over the forest canopy. The monstrous, thorn-skinned creature took its first step, and the forests trembled with awe. So, what's so important about all of that? Well, to grow your own Talaa, you just need to follow the following steps. Step 1. Plant a fossilized piece of a Sporemound root in the ground. Step 2. Sacrifice a few thousand souls to your root in the ground. Don't skimp out on those souls. Winning or otherwise, a Sporemound doesn't care. Step 3. Nurture well. You'll know if you're doing the right thing, because you'll start to see a mound of brambles and fronds appear out of the ground. If the brambles and fronds do not appear, don't worry. Just feed your Sporemound more souls. It'll eventually come around. Step 4. Admire your monster. If you've stuck to a strict diet of souls and you've looked after your Talaa, your new raging Sporemound should be ready to rampage. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Yasharaj practically came back from his heart alone, and his breath created the Shah. Sethun and Yogg-Saron were mounds of it when we found them, and if I'm not completely mistaken, all the old gods love war and conflict because of the death that occurs. Not for the bodies, by the way, but for the souls of the fallen. So, the process of creating a Sporemound is eerily similar to the forms and feeding habits of the old gods. Coincidence? I'll leave that for you to decide. Though, there's one more thing I swear I didn't catch on to until I was halfway through this theory. Gnarlgar, if you didn't pick up from earlier, is a Treant, literally the old druid form Treant. Well, funny thing, right? Here are a few extracts stringed together about what the tree could actually do. Extracts. Chronicle Volume 2. Heralds of the Overgrowth. Page 25. Gnarlgar commanded immense power over nature magic and the spirit of life that flowed through the wilds. The Treant used its magics to strengthen the other primals in their war against the Breakers. Gnarlgar also honed its own abilities and learned how to influence the minds of its plant kin. Before long, the Treant could manipulate other primals and guide their actions. Gnarlgar taught Talador's Botanni unique ways to harness nature magic. They crafted pools of potent nature energies, which they used to transfer the spirits of fallen Genesaur into new bodies. So, other than confirming this tree had the ability to do everything but fallen mind-controlled plants, it also taught the Botanni how to create pools of energy that stored spirits. Could the pools of liquid that surrounded Yogg-Saron and Sethun be similar, if not the same? Maybe. I think probably. But other than the fact, Gnarlgar seems to have the old god minion mind domination trait, it's the fact he's a Treant that makes him truly intriguing. Why? The Doomsayers. Quick history, the Doomsayers are a bunch of quacks that talk about the end of the world. They've turned up 3 times in-game. Cata pre-patch, Legion pre-patch, and Legion 3.0. The patch where Argus appeared in the sky. These guys are almost as quack as me, though leave it to Blizz to make the quacks sound sane. During Legion, the Doomsayers handed out pamphlets. Those pamphlets are as cryptic as the old god whispers. However, a few pamphlets actually hinted at the events that were to occur in Legion. So, during the last round of these crazy-ass pamphlets, it's been assumed they serve the same purpose of hinting at future lore. This is where the scrawled pamphlet comes in, and it reads, "It's not what you think. How many existential disasters can one world face? Was not recently we were told time-traveling orcs were coming to kill us? Were we not told that an evil Iceman from the north was sending his undead thralls after us? What you see in the sky is nothing but an illusion. Think about it. We all know that the so-called cataclysm was a conspiracy involving earthquake machines and an elaborate dragon puppeteering device piloted by Centaur and Worgen. If it was so easy for the leaders of the Horde and the Alliance to fool us, it is probably the simplest thing to make us believe this new threat appeared in our sky. The true threat to Azeroth is the same as it always was. Treants. Those stupid little tree things are waiting for us to let our guard down. Right now they are massing their numbers while our greatest champions are hunting fruitlessly for this so-called demon invasion. Get your axes and wood chippers ready, because they are coming." Believe me, I know the irony of me saying that pamphlet has something to do with the future lore of WoW does not escape me. However, considering it is apparent the word Treant is only used describing Gnarlgar in all 3 volumes of Chronicle, as well as the point I just pointed out about Gnarlgar and Talaa, I'm honestly hoping I don't sound as quacked as I normally do. I mean, I would find it hilarious if out of all the quacked pamphlets, the most quacked one was the one that hinted the most at what was to come. But hey, Kultiran Druids and the Drust may be something completely different. That's it for part 2. Convinced the Sporemounds may be old gods yet? Leave a comment with your answer and any other opinions you'd like to add. Speculation and theory crafting can't be done without community. Part 3 will eventually come, however the plan is to do a few different theories before returning to the Sporemounds. There are too many things to speculate on at the moment, and I'm kind of behind. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I have a Twitter. Follow it if you'd like. To get on to what the Quacks have been insisting on, here's the finale. If you've started to believe portions of Sporemound theory is plausible, then 2 places on Azeroth have probably sprung to mind. As I did though, you've probably realized how boned we actually are when B.F.A starts and as it progresses. I honestly only thought of these places though because of the Shinies and Lucky Dudes Discord. Link to Discord on the channel will be in the description. But more importantly, recognition for this part of theory needs to go to Shogu and Locke of Shinies and Lucky Dudes. Remember the names, because they are really good at speculation, theory crafting, and blowing people's minds on a daily basis. So, the first place pointed out to me that could relate to Sporemound theory was Tedrassil. You know, the big tree that's going to burn? The tree that apparently has roots that go all around Azeroth and down as deep as the world soul. The tree that is sentient and can talk to druids. The tree that was also apparently, and I stress apparently, corruption-free upon growth, but then was infected with a nightmare only after a fell-tainted branch of Xavius was grafted to it. Cough cough. The tree that has a few too many dead souls attracted to it. You know, that Tedrassil? Well, if you were to consider Sporemound theory in Tedrassil, it's quite plausible the whole purpose of the tree to begin with was to either A, be a new body for an old god, or B, birth a new old god, you know, Talaa style. The overarching theory, speculation, story goes something like this. Vandal Staghelm, after losing his son due to his emotional state and history, is compromised by the Old Gods. Probably unknowingly at this point. Why Vandal though? The Old Gods needed him to make another Andrassil, except at this time the tree was going to be used to get them out of the Emerald Dream. The Legion eventually turns up and Nordrassil receives a beating. This is the perfect time to plant a new tree. So, Vandal locks Malfurion away somewhere inside the Emerald Dream and grows Tedrassil atop something that allows it to grow to a size similar to that of Nordrassil. Nordrassil, by the way, was grown on the New Well of Eternity, so you can only imagine what I'm thinking when it comes to what Tedrassil was actually grown on. Azerite? N'Zoth? Take your pick. I'm betting on N'Zoth. Why? Well, Tedrassil is technically located on the old domain of the Elemental Lord of Water, Neptulon. So, you know that cancelled Abyssal Maw raid in Kata? I get the impression it would have hinted at N'Zoth not being where he's supposed to be. or at the very least being inside a plane of water but in a different location around the world. Then you get the release of Chronicle and voila, N'Zoth is under Teldrassil. Anyway, everything goes well, trees start to become corrupted by the nightmare. Then Storm Rage happens. The tree gets blessed by two aspects and they accidentally lock an old god away. What's the old god's response? Starts the cataclysm, kill the aspects, hopefully frees itself. That obviously fails. What does the old god do now? Stuck in a prison of its own making. It waits, it gathers forces, hatches a new plan, and oh look, the Pantheon and Argus are imprisoned. Time to burn this mistake of a prison and make my escape. The end. That idea courtesy of Locke Nesherview. The second location, also courtesy of Locke, is Razorfen. Where? Yeah, I know, I basically forgot where the place was until recently as well. Southern Barrens, borders of the Thousand Needles, the place where the wild god Agamagan died, you know, the boar wild god. The place is full of pig-like quillboar, and more importantly is full of thorny brambles. To cut to the chase, if Sporemound theory pans out, this is the scenario. Y'Shaarj is pulled out of Azeroth and pieces of its body fall back to the earth. One piece specifically falls on a ton of Azerite. That will be explained later. It remains inactive. That is until Agamagan during the War of the Ancient dies on top of that piece of the old god. Most likely, Agamagan's blood purifies the piece of the old god due to whatever happened on Hydra, which will Agamagan become a wild god. And what you eventually get is the Razorfen. It grows but it's not out of control. Skip to Vanilla and the Scourge have begun to infest the area. No problem. Kill the Lich, walk away. One problem. Didn't do the job properly and the Cataclysm happens. Now things have gotten a lot worse. As in, besides the possibility of a new strain of the Plague of Undeath, the Quillboar resurrected the Lich. I pause because last time a Lich was resurrected, it poisoned the area so thoroughly the inhabitants of the area had to destroy the source of the corruption, otherwise face the land and themselves falling to that corruption. I'm talking about the Blood Elves in Kel'Thuzad, by the way. With the Razorfen, we didn't even actually cleanse the corruption. We just killed the Lich, and so now the corrupted Razorfen that probably killed the original Razorfen is completely out of control, spreading as far north as Durotar whilst invading Mulgore, and it's probably been tainted by some form of undead corruption. And it doesn't even seem as if the Razorfen is connected to the Dream. Oh right, and all this started back in Cata, a few in-game years ago, so you can imagine what's going on now. As for the Azerite thing, well, other than the power required to maintain roots that reach Durotar after having a Lich practically raised in the epicenter of the plant, the proof is in the Doomstone, as in the thing shamans take off Magath the Grim Totem that looks oddly similar to the demon/dragon soul, the thing the Twilight's Hammer attempted to use to blow up 1,000 Nils with for no credible reason, the stone that actually makes shaman DPS OP as F. Ever wonder what that crone has been after all this time? Or who she may have been working for and what they've been after? Anyway, if the Razorfen turns out to be a Death Touch Sporemound, RIP Thunderbluff, unless someone notices soon. Until next time though, have a nice day!